when our work on this earth is done. When the battle's over and the victory's won, when through all the earth His praise will ring and all the heavenly angels sing, it'll be enough just to hear the Son and hear Him say, "My child, well done. You've kept my faith so strong and true. I knew that I could count on you."
August 16, 2003, Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore faced a crowd of 10,000 during the Restore America rally on the steps of the state capitol. As he spoke these words, a tall man in dark shades and a black suit stood behind him. He is Leonard Cleveland Holifield, the chief's loyal bodyguard, prepared to put his life in the path of any desperate assassin. Holifield is a teacher, a black belt martial artist, a soldier, a father, and a son. What drives Holifield to achievement? The story of this amazing man reveals a powerful legacy instilled early in life. A story of a hyperactive little boy who grew up to become a legend in the world of martial arts, a legend and a legacy. Leonard Holifield was born in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to Cleveland and Ruth Holifield. When Leonard was 4 years old, his family transplanted to Compton, California, near Los Angeles, where his father Cleveland attended college part-time and worked as a TV repairman.
Ruth and I met in May of 1956 when I took her to a prom.
In fact, he was a blind date because my date could not come. So a girlfriend of mine, she knew Cleve, and she asked him if he would take me to the prom. I think that was the night that I fell in love with him, and we've been married 50 years now.
I had been in the service and I was discharged in '56, and I had planned on continuing my career in boxing and also wanted to be an electronic technician.
January 5th of 1960 is when we had our first son, which was Leonard.
And that's how we got started. And then in the 1960 time frame, I left Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and came to California. I think Leonard was about 18 months at that time.
Leonard has always admired his dad, and I think he's always watching him of the things that he do, and he always wanted to be like him. Even when he was a little boy, he had a attaché case, and he would carry it around with him. And when I would go to the supermarket, they would say, "Oh, you are Leonard's mother," and they knew Leonard. They said, "Oh, he always have his attaché case." And I said, "Yes, he probably have a sandwich and then a pair of tennis shoes."
My parents have always been devout Christians. I was brought up in the church, as was my sister, my brother, and we went to church every Sunday, was in Sunday school all of our lives, and have always kept a close relationship to God.
I believe, and I've always believed, that environment that you're in have a great influence on the way your life turns out, because your peers have a great influence on you, and he never got the opportunity to get too embedded in peer groups that were detrimental to his behavior and his conduct.
Years ago, when I was just a young boy, about 7, 8 years old, I was caught up in the Bruce Lee era. And as you know, everyone wanted to be like Bruce Lee. I had Bruce Lee posters all over my wall and whatnot. And I was a kid that was very hyper. So I would run around the house kicking things and doing karate moves and worrying my mother to death because she thought I was going to damage all the furniture in the house.
In fact, he was so active until around the time that he was 4. If I would travel with him, I had to put a little leash on him. I remember traveling from California going to Pennsylvania, and I had to put a leash on him. And a lot of people thought that this was rather cruel, but I said it was for his own safety. It was the love that I had for him to protect him, because if he get away from you, he's gone. And so we was on the train, and Leonard waited until I was asleep, and then he unleashed himself. And of course, he had the blanket and he ran down the aisle of the train and he woke people up. And they woke up, they were, they was afraid. He was running with his blanket over his head and I woke up and all this chaos on this train. It was Leonard. But he had always been very active. In fact, just so active until when he got older, Cleve said, we have to do something to put this energy in another way.
So one day my father came home and he says, Lenny, I found a karate school. And I thought it was great. It was a Friday night, it was raining. He says, let's take you over there. So I go to this karate school in Gardena, California. And I go in there and I see these students in white belts. And they're jumping and flipping and kicking. And to me, they were like black belts, because I was really, really impressed with all this. And I'm looking at this. And he signed me up. And I started my first karate class that following Monday. I would train at the karate school with my classmates. Then I'd get home, wouldn't have anyone to train with. So I made these dummies. I took old jeans and I stuffed them with clothes and made, filled out the pants and I filled out the shirts and then I put these heads on top of them. And I actually made these dummies. I had several of them, about 6 of them. Scared my mother to death because I was storming the garage and she'd come home from work and open the garage and she'd see all these bodies, these dummies. But really, honestly, I would make these dummies and I would practice on them and I would throw them because in judo was the art of grabbing and throwing and wrestling and that sort of thing. So I would work my techniques on these dummies, all the different techniques I would learn, just to kind of give you an idea of how much I was into this. And what happened was in the karate school, you get to a certain rank, I didn't have to pay for lessons because I became in a very short time like a junior assistant and everything I learned in the martial arts, I picked up on it just like that. And I would help out at the studio, teach, clean, general upkeep of the dojo, meaning karate school in Japanese.
Leonard trained in karate 5 days a week and in judo on weekends. He excelled just as fast in judo as he did in karate and was moved to the advanced class within 3 months of training. He graduated from Gardena High School in 1977.
Leonard went all the way through his college without purchasing one book, but yet he passed. And I told his dad, I said, I don't think he's going to pass. I don't think he's going to graduate. He's just telling us he's going to graduate. And here we went to his graduation, and here he is in his robe, and here he's coming up, and they're saying, Leonard Cleve Holifield.
I took a lot of good notes, my father will tell you. I took a lot of good notes. My father used to be amazed that I wouldn't come home with any books. He'd say, well, where's your books? How come you're not? But I took I had a very good memory on taking notes, and I always got good grades. So I was able to maintain my school studies, my school work, those subjects, but at the same time, push on with my martial arts.
During this transitional period in his life, Leonard set about to create his own version of self-defense, which he named Sikaran.
Sikaran is an integrated style of martial art, which comes out of the root system, which is called Sikaran, which is S-I-K-A-R-A-N, foot use, which included leg entanglements, sweeps, and kicks. The martial art of Sikaran karate, as we teach it today, which was developed by Dr. Holifield, is an integrated style of martial art, which includes judo, jiu-jitsu, aikido, hapkido, combat karate, shotokan karate, ninjutsu, boxing, wrestling, knife fighting. In other words, it culminates with a multitude of other styles to make this one style, which is called Sikaran.
Thus, in 1985, the Sikaran Karate Federation was birthed. In time, Leonard's schools would spread to Ohio, Alabama, Oregon, and even foreign countries such as Italy, South Africa, Greece, and Taiwan. Children in Leonard's schools are taught to follow a code of conduct and strict discipline. A student must promise to only use his skill in self-defense or defense of others, to obey and respect his parents and teachers, to always keep a positive attitude, and most importantly, to always put God first.
Karate to me, and as I came up, it was a great way of learning discipline, following rules, and a set code of ethics and conduct in martial arts. The Christian side that I put into it, I just felt that God has a lot of rules and regulations and ways that we should live as well. And I just thought it would be very, very important to add those Christian values into the code of ethics that we already had established, because we had lost so much morality in our society and with our children. And I thought it would be an injustice, if I didn't do that. As an instructor, I had a responsibility not only to teach the practical skill, but also to teach good moral values to my students so that they can carry that along with them as well.
Leonard entered the United States Army in April of 1987 at the age of 27. During basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, he was much older and mature than his comrades and was quickly put into leadership positions by his drill instructors.
My father is a former Marine. He fought in the Korean War, and he thought it would be a good thing for me to give some of my life to the military, to the armed forces. So I made a decision. At 27 years old, I went in. I'll never forget, it was 1 in the morning. I was up watching Rambo, getting into the mindset, and my father was down in the living room with me, and the recruiter came and picked me up to take me down to the station to ship me off. Loved it because it was an opportunity for me to really exhibit my leadership skills. I wanted to become a non-commissioned officer to work with the soldiers. You see, I knew when I went in, I wanted to train soldiers, and I knew I wanted to do karate when I went into the military. But they don't call it that in the military, they call it hand-to-hand combat. So when I went into the military and we had our first hand-to-hand combat training and basic training, they're doing these throws that I learned way back in judo training: ogoshi, taiotoshi, ippon seonagi. These are over the hip throws, one-arm shoulder throws, around the hip throw. We're doing all that, and it came easy to me because I knew this stuff. My drill instructors had paperwork that followed me when I came into the military for my martial arts. So my drill instructors knew that I was a martial arts instructor. And during basic training in the sand pit, I was standing back there in formation. I'll never forget it. And the drill sergeant said, "Private Holifield, front and center." And I thought I was in trouble. I run up to the front, and he says, "Private Holifield is going to assist us today in hand-to-hand combat."
Now we're going to learn how to move from the fighter stance. Now we've got some switching drills. Now when you're in the fighter stance, I'll call single switch. When I say that, you're going to switch opposite leg.
Didn't tell me anything. Now, as a recruit or as a boot, which they call us in basic training, our only job is to listen to the drill instructors. We don't train anybody. But for some reason, they called me up there to assist. So I worked with them. And after that training session, I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I said, I want to be a hand-to-hand combat instructor. But I also said, I don't want to be just any hand-to-hand combat instructor. I want to be the chief instructor for the entire Army.
Your drill sergeants and myself take what we teach very seriously. This training is to help to save your life.
After duty hours, I would start teaching my Sikaran karate. As a matter of fact, I even modified it to a combat version, combat Sikaran version for soldiers. And this happened everywhere I was ever stationed in the military. I started a school, a Sikaran school. At the same time I'm teaching, I'm researching. I'm studying the history of hand-to-hand combat in the Army. I'm studying the history of hand-to-hand combat since World War I, World War II. I'm reading all of the FMs on hand-to-hand combat, FM 21-150, that hadn't been revised in over 20 or 25 years.
And it's used to defend against kicks. Now we don't want to do this. We don't want all this body motion. Let the arm work.
So that was another thing that I started to do, was to rewrite FM 21-150 to submit changes to that FM. While I'm doing that, I'm gaining the attention of high brass up at the Pentagon in Washington. My training is requested all over the post. I'm in Army magazines, Army Trainer, Soldiers Magazine, Military Police Magazine, Chorus Magazine, and it's starting again to snowball. It eventually caught the attention of Sergeant Major of the Army, Richard Kidd, the highest enlisted officer in the military, and Army General Chief of Staff at the time, which was General Gordon Sullivan. I was given the designation as Chief Combatives Instructor for the Army. The Sergeant Major of the Army flew to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to have a personal meeting with me to discuss the overall hand-to-hand combat throughout the Army. The way they were training soldiers in hand-to-hand combat, in basic training. The soldiers were training in military fatigue, military pants, green t-shirts, and tennis shoes. You don't go to combat in Nikes. You don't go to combat in tennis shoes. You don't go to combat in just pants and a shirt. You go to combat in full military gear. To me, that's how a soldier should train. There's a lot of equipment that you wear, restrictive equipment, that you have to learn to work around. That's what you're going to face the enemy in. You're going to face the enemy in all that equipment, and you need to know how to fight in that equipment. So prior to me getting in there and making changes, you had soldiers training in soft sand pits in tennis shoes. And then they couldn't understand, why are all these soldiers going on sick call with twisted ankles? Well, you know, you have them, there's no ankle support. These soldiers need to have on their high-laced leather boots for ankle stability and ankle support, and you'll alleviate that problem. You won't have these twisted ankles. To me, it was a common sense issue. And they needed to train in full combat gear. And when I started looking into this, those are the changes that I made. I said, you soldiers need to be out here in full combat gear. Kevlar helmet, everything. Because that's what you're going to fight in.
Never forget that you are an American soldier, huh? And you are part of the best army and fighting force in the world, huh?
With his dreamed position of chief engineer secured, Leonard was given the option of heading either the hand-to-hand combat program at Fort Benning, Georgia, or the military police school at Fort McClellan, Alabama. He chose the military police. Finding that the school lacked in self-defense skills, Leonard immediately began training his students in advanced, unarmed self-defense tactics. His reputation quickly spread through the military police community, as Army commanders nationwide lobbied to have the legendary Leonard Holifield instruct their units.
We first introduced you to Leonard Holifield last night on CBS 8 News at 6. He spent 10 years in the armed forces, which included time in the Middle East during Operation Desert Storm back in 1991. That service included one night he'll never forget.
I had just come off of a roving guard duty. We were out there in Iraq. It was probably close to 1 in the morning. And I still had all my gear on. And I went to the TOC. The TOC, the TOC, is the Tactical Operations Center. We get a call on the landline, and it's from a soldier out at one of the guard points. And he says he saw someone coming through the perimeter. So our guy on the landline says, well, who was it? The guy out at the guard position says he didn't know. Our guy in the TOC says, well, what was he saying? What was he yelling? The guy at the guard post said he didn't know. He said, well, was it in English? He said, no. As soon as that happened, all the red flags went up and everybody just started taking cover. Everybody in the TOC, you know, guys were tripping over boxes, and it was just a mass chaos. So the higher enlisted sergeant there told everyone to drop. We cut the lights off in the TOC. We dropped to the floor. As soon as we did that, outside the TOC, we hear someone yelling in Arabic. We didn't understand what, it's a surreal, it's, you can't explain it. It's like you're in the Twilight Zone. It's like there's an enemy soldier outside of the Tactical Operations Center where we're doing our war planning, and he's yelling in Arabic. I mean, how, that doesn't happen. This isn't real. And the guy is that authentic Arabic, la 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 la, Saddam, Saddam, la la la. Now we understood Saddam, but he's la 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 la. So I had some NVGs, some night vision goggles on. The commander inside the TOC, the higher enlisted, he says, check it out. So I peek outside the tent with these NVGs on, and I see this enemy soldier about maybe 12 feet out from the entrance of the tent, maybe. And I turn to the leader in there, and I tell him, I say, I see him. I see the guy out there. So he says to me, okay, Holifield, you got him. That's what he says. And, and I look out again, and I see this guy. So I tell the guys behind me, my fellow soldiers, I say, listen, I'm going out to get him. You guys follow me and watch my back. Oh, Holifield, we got you, man. We got your back. So I went out on him, and I got up about 6 feet from him. I had my M16 locked and loaded and ready to fire, pointed directly at him. And I say, drop, drop. And he's yelling, la 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 la, Saddam, Saddam, la 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 la. I'm saying, drop, drop, la 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 la. So we're miscommunicating. We don't understand what each other's saying. All I know at that point is that I need to quiet this guy. I need to shut him up because he's making too much noise. He could give away our position. I don't know how many of them are out here. So that's when I made a critical decision to go hand to hand with him. I threw him down to the ground. I used a judo technique called the taiotoshi, which is an over-the-leg throw. I threw him to the ground. The adrenaline was so high at that time between both of us pretty much fighting for our lives. He jumped back up. At that time, I grabbed him and literally picked him up over my head, threw him to the ground, grabbed his arm and twisted him over onto his stomach and locked his arm up in a controlling technique and his neck to breaking point. And then I had him secured. He couldn't move. It was that time that I turned to look for my backup, and no one was there. No one had came out. I saw some tumbleweeds back there, but no one had came out, to cover me. So I say, get out here, I got him, get out here, get out here. The guys come out. Long story short, after we get his identification, we find out that the soldier is a defector from Saddam Hussein's Air Defense Cavalry. We find out also that, at that time, Saddam Hussein was killing anyone that defected from him. He had a firing squad that would just shoot him on sight. So this guy got away from that. He got clear of that. Come to find out that he was a defector just trying to get away from Saddam Hussein. He was scared for his life. He thought we were going to kill him. We gave him an apple. He finished the apple in like 3 bites. 1, 2, 3, apple was gone. The guy was hungry. He had been wandering through the desert for like 2 days. The only thing he had to eat, he had a jar that was half full of water with an onion in it.
They called me, the phone was ringing, and Leonard, did you see Leonard on the TV and that he captured this prisoner of war? And I kept wondering, why would he do that? Why would he run out and why would Leonard do this thing? Leonard have always amazed me. Even today, he amazes me. I ask him today, Leonard, how did this happen? And he goes, Mom, only by the grace of God. A lot of things just unexplainable.
It was very interesting, and I took over a battalion at Fort Bragg, and Dr. Holifield was the battalion nuclear, biological, and chemical officer. One of the first things I was surprised to learn was that he was the first American to capture an Iraqi prisoner of war. Very big, powerful man, but yet one of the best gentlemen I've ever run across. I think he called it the fist of iron, where he would break 12 or 13 large bricks that were set on fire. And we were having a battalion organization day when all the families would come out. And he was going to do that as a demonstration for the battalion. And there were probably a couple hundred people there. And then he got everything set up, and I'm looking at these bricks, and he has lighter fluid that he's going to light the thing on fire with, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, he's going to break his hand, and my commander is going to come back and be angry at me for allowing him to do this. And I said, well, he hasn't let me down yet. Nobody believed he could do it, and he made it look easy. Just incredible, but that was just the type of guy he is. He was very proud to be an American and a soldier. And it just kind of came across in the way that he dealt with people. And then he was also so disciplined, and his discipline set the example for other people. And it wasn't just physical discipline, but it was the mental discipline of understanding what your job was, knowing it better than anybody else, and then being able to execute. Tireless worker. I mean, he just had character, and it's hard to find people with that level of character. And that's what was impressive about Dr. Holifield.
By the authority vested in me by the Constitution of the State of Alabama, I'm pleased to present this monument depicting the moral foundation of our law, and hereby authorize it to be placed in the rotunda of the Alabama Judicial Building. Without an acknowledgement of God, I cannot do my duty. I must acknowledge God. Acknowledging God as the source, a moral source of our law.
Finding no other viable alternatives, this court hereby orders that Roy S. Moore be removed from his position of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama. This court is now adjourned.
Here's a man who could have remained Chief Justice of Alabama. There's no question about that, had he not taken the stand that he did.
God's given a great many things to Roy Moore, but one of the special things he's given him is the friendship of Dr. Leonard Holifield. You don't want to mess with Leonard Holifield.
Believe me, y'all might want to see the fight between he and I, but I wouldn't. I was walking out of a church thing the other day where they had about 3,000 pastors, and I'd finished, they were standing up, and I was leaving, and just before I got the door, I thought I'd do this thing about turning around and, you know, waving to the crowd, and I turned around and I hit Leonard right upside the head and his glasses went like this, and I said, I'm dead. I met Leonard several years ago when I went into the YMCA, and he was teaching a karate class to young children.
And I see this gentleman in a white t-shirt and some gym trunks, white socks, some tennis shoes. And he looks at me and he says, hey, you're a karate instructor? I said, yes, sir. He says, well, I'm Roy Moore. And he says, you may have heard of me. You know, people call me the Ten Commandments judge.
When Pilate said, don't you know I could kill you? And Jesus said, don't you know you would have no authority, but that it was given from above? Didn't Jesus? You see, Jesus.
I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who he was from Steve. I just said, yes, sir. I didn't know who he was. And he says, well, tell me about your system. So I told him a little bit about Sycaron. He says, well, I've got 3 boys. And I'm interested in putting them into a good karate school. And of course, my school is Christian-based, so I think that really appealed to him.
Well, I developed a friendship with Leonard, but also a great respect for him and his ability, not only as a martial art teacher, but you know, just his service to his country in the Desert Storm, and you know, his ability to lead men. And perhaps one of the greatest qualities Leonard has is his dealing with children. One time I was in his studio, and he had a group of children who were advancing to the next stage of karate. And one of them was severely handicapped and could barely stand. And yet this boy had gone through a course and was taking the test. And one of the tests was supposedly when you take a blow to your chest and get knocked backwards. And I was watching as Leonard came to this boy and to see how he handled him, and he handled him perfectly because he did enough force to make the boy understand that he was in the course and yet not enough to hurt him. And this had a great effect on this boy. I could see the pride in his face, and this is a young handicapped boy that didn't have a chance in a lot of sports and things, but he finally felt a degree of accomplishment.
Keep in mind, during the time that I'm working with his boys, I'm really getting to know Roy Moore. I'm getting to know Kayla. I'm getting to know their family. So we got very close. We established and formed a very close bond, very close friendship, which I think is what God had planned all along.
When I became Chief Justice in 2000, I needed somebody for security, and I asked Leonard to come with me to the Alabama Supreme Court, and he did. And he came with me to the Alabama Supreme Court as a security officer. And he became my executive security officer and was with me throughout the experience. And of course, we had a lot of occasion to have security, and it was greatly needed and appreciated.
When he asked me, it was right there on the spot. I accepted. Told him I'd be honored. And then shortly thereafter, his family relocated to Montgomery. All the mail that came to the Supreme Court for him, I screened. Of course, they would be screened at the post office, then it would get to us, the mailroom would screen it. It would get to me, I would screen it before it got put in his hand. One person at one time has sent in a letter to him on 52 sticky notes. And I had to spread these out and piece this thing together, decipher it, read it, retype the thing out, and then get it out to my personal friend of mine by the name of Barry Wilson, who's a handwriting analyst, and he was able to actually decipher this thing and say that, yeah, we're dealing with a nut.
For several years, Leonard and I traveled all over the country and doing various speaking engagements and teaching about the relationship between God and law and God and government.
I didn't know everything that it would entail. I found that out later. But it was something that I felt very comfortable about doing. And later on, I realized that this was my calling. I've known him for 10 years, so I've seen the personal side of him as well as the professional side. And he's as real as they come. He's just a down-to-earth, regular, average guy, but he's got very strong morals, very strong values. He's a man that says what he means what he says, and if he says he's going to do something, he does it. And then when I look back over my life, you stop and you take inventory over your life, and you look at all this training that you've had in martial arts and in the military and in executive protection and law enforcement, and all of that training was to prepare me for my current station in life, which is to protect Roy Moore, the former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. And it's just an unreal honor to be in this position to protect such a man.
Now, Dr. Holifield is a very special man. He is ferociously loyal to the men that he loves, and he sticks with the Chief Justice like he's glued to him. And I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun to travel with Leonard Holifield and with the Chief Justice. But if anybody out there ever has any funny ideas, let me warn them, don't even think about it. Leonard Holifield is one of the most accomplished personal assistant, bodyguard, friend protectors a man could ever hope for.
I think that he commits himself to anything that he undertakes. His self-discipline is such that he's willing to pay any price to be successful. But what's unique about him is that although he has that type of discipline, he put his fellow soldiers first, he puts his family first, and I think that is an element of character that everybody just doesn't have, and that's the thing that strikes me most about him.
The only thing that I could say that would be lasting is how proud I am of him and his life and the direction that he's taken in life and his achievements in life. That is what any parent would just be very, very happy about and for.
As a child growing up, my father set a very great example for me. He was a great family man, still is. A lot that my father taught me, I'm teaching my son, and I just hope I can be half as good as dad to my son that my father was to me.
I would tell him, Leonard, you know, your dad worked hard and he had worked to get to where he is. Well, Leonard want it like right now, but to be like his dad.
He's awesome. He's an awesome man. We're really proud of him. He's a wonderful son.
When David was about to turn the kingdom over to Solomon, he brought him into his quarters and said that he needs to now show himself a man. It's important for us to show ourselves as men. I want to be able to step out each and every day, and when the sun shines on my face, know that what I've done has made a positive impact on the world. And it's impossible for me to do that if I'm not trusting in the Lord.